Well, as we draw our way towards the end of another year, we have 2023 in our sights. And what will 2023 hold? No doubt there'll be more and more controversies. Issues around climate change will no doubt be dominant, as well as the economic issues that go with cost of living and the challenges that face every single one of us. Bill Muehlenberg has been looking into one of those areas that's likely to gain momentum over this next year, with a focus on what's been happening with the Dutch farmers. Bill's back with us. Hello, Bill. Welcome back to 2020.
Always great to be with you, Neil.
And before we get underway, Bill, you're still shivering down your way in Melbourne. That's not so good. Climate change sorts of issues that we'll be talking about.
Global warming, yes, it's been freezing here in Melbourne. I got my jumper on, as you can see, and we're hoping maybe by Christmas, which is coming real fast, hopefully it'll warm up just a smidge. But boy, it sure has been cold up till now.
Well, we know the climate is changing, whether that's man-made or not. That's not stopping a lot of governments from moving systematically to take control of a lot of issues. Farming, you're seeing as potentially on the agenda for control from governments.
Yeah, well, it already is in a number of places. We've seen it already in Canada, Sri Lanka, Holland, and other European nations. A lot of it having to do with things like fertilizer, which now our powers that be are telling us are bad. We shouldn't have so much fertilizer. It's got all these horrible chemicals and it's destroying the environment. Well, the EU and other bodies are now clamping down on countries. Holland is one of those that's foolishly, I think, gone along with it to radically reduce the use of fertilizers. Of course, that means, less food, usually. Fertilizer has been a great champion, used wisely and properly to give us more food, to feed more people, to reduce starvation around the globe. So many experts say, we need more fertilizer, not less. But countries like Holland, where I used to live, they're going along with the EU dictates. Not only that, but it's getting much, much scarier. They just announced that some 3,000 farms will be forcibly closed down by the government. Sure, they're offering them compensation if they want, but of course most farmers don't want it. They want to keep farming. They want to keep producing food for the people. But the state has already said, nope, you either sell up your lands and we get rid of them, or, you'll pay the price. So either way, this is bad news. And sadly, we've seen this kind of collectivization of farms, nationalization of farmers before, and it's never been a very good outcome when that happens.
We might get into some of that history just ahead, but if you make climate change a national emergency, you have this opportunity to create extra powers for governments. That's, I guess, where we ought to be thinking caution required.
Well, absolutely, and good point. And of course, we've seen it, right? We've seen it in the last 3 years. What did we just have? National global emergency. First one, COVID was the excuse. So we had, as you said, unprecedented rise of the power of the state, a huge, massive rise in the suppression of basic human rights and freedoms, right? People locked down here in Melbourne 23 hours a day, couldn't go beyond 5 kilometers. I mean, even in wartime, we've never seen these kind of draconian, heavy-handed powers of the state. So many have said the COVID so-called crisis or emergency was a nice test run, but we really want to run with the same things when it comes to climate. The state can announce this is an emergency, we have to act now. Therefore, any number of things goes, whether we take over your farms, whether we start forcing you to eat insects. And by the way, that is a big part of what's being called, not just Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Many state players are now pushing this. They're saying we have to ban meat. No more red meat for you guys, no more farms, no more fertilizers, no more cars, no more travel. I mean, the list is endless. It not only looks quite a bit like the COVID mandates, but in the name of saving the planet, we're really going to destroy the planet. Whenever you have the state taking over things like food production, well, it always goes bad real big, and people end up starving. But sadly, some throughout the Great Reset, some throughout the COVID years, some throughout the World Economic Forum have all said we're overpopulated. We have far too many people. We got to take radical steps to get rid of a lot of people. The very same excuses have been used on the climate. We're overpopulated, we're destroying the earth, therefore we must do something to get rid of a lot of people. Well, getting rid of a lot of farms and farmers, letting millions perhaps starve to death as a result, that's one way to do it.
You're saying what's happening in Holland with the Dutch farmers is not really new. How do you describe what's going on there now and dangerous precedents?
Well, again, it's when the state starts telling you it can do things better than you can, right? Whether some bureaucrat in The Hague or Canberra or Washington starts telling you, I can farm better than you guys who are on the farm, have been all your life, and your parents before. That's always a worry. Bureaucrats are not well placed to run anything, certainly not governments and certainly not farms. But we have seen this happen over and over. Just a century ago, in the early 30s, we have what was a man-made famine. Millions of people killed in Ukraine. Now, if you know anything about Ukraine, you know anything about going shopping today, we're finding all these food shortages. Why is that? Well, Ukraine has long been known as the breadbasket of Europe, very good at producing foods. Of course, now invaded by Russia, and in part, Russia is keeping fertilizer out of Ukraine. So a double blow to food production in Ukraine, but we've seen it before. Stalin, in the interests of pushing communism, hated the farmers, hated the peasants, wanted nothing to do with private property. That's the heart of communism, by the way, get rid of all private property. So he nationalized Ukrainian farms, sent the farmers off to the gulags, sent peasants off. So between taking over the farms and, of course, getting the predictable results, mass starvation, millions and millions of people died, either through the starvation or being shipped off to concentration camps and the like. So this is communism in action. This is how it works, and this is always the outcome of it. And many are now warning that what we see with the EU, with the WEF, the Great Reset, we see more communism in action. Get rid of private property, take away rights of the citizens, let the state determine how everything is run. So what we see now in Holland and elsewhere, it's starting to look a whole lot familiar with what we've already seen. And certainly Dutch farmers are up in arms. They're having these big, massive protests with tractors going, miles and miles down Dutch highways, saying, no, we will not give up our farms. We will not stop feeding the Dutch people. So there's a real showdown brewing there. We can pray, and we need to, for the Dutch farmers.
So it's either ownership or control of industries that might be something that we'd be concerned about. So what about these things close to home for us, Bill? Government control, say, over the coal and gas caps on prices. The thought of big government and interventions that take over from the private enterprise that thinks they can get it right and make a profit, and then government comes to intervene. Are we seeing something similar? Is there some connection there, do you think?
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's not far away Europe or Canada. It's right here in Australia. I mean, just think of what we have. We have probably one of the most energy sufficient nations on earth, right, in terms of natural resources, whether it's coal or unused uranium. We're happy to, maybe let others have it, but we're not doing it ourselves. There's no reason at all why we should have rising energy prices, why we should be having shortages of any kind. But as you say, let the government step in, get in the way of farmers or miners or industry, those who want to make use of these great resources we have, again, it's going to spell trouble. Always does. Whenever the government interferes, you want to back away. I'm reminded of Ronald Reagan, I think, put it this way: the most worrying thing you're ever going to hear from the state is when they say, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Uh, Usually it doesn't work out that way. Usually everything gets a whole lot worse. So yeah, what's happening in Holland and elsewhere, we're seeing plenty of signs here, whether it's, putting extra climate surcharges on travel, forcing people to ditch their cars, get electric vehicles, maybe limiting how many plane flights you can make use of. All the while the jet setters, right, fly into Davos, Switzerland to attend a Klaus Schwab Gab Fest every year. So it's one rule for them, a different for us. But yep, it's all sadly coming right now, and Australia's included.
So, Bill, as a Christian, how do we think about these things?
Yeah, well, good point. In fact, just the other night, I was doing exactly the same in the light of all the stuff that's happening here and overseas. It's looking to be a real worry indeed. It seems the powers of darkness keep winning, the good guys keep losing. So I was just crying out to the Lord and saying, come on, what's going on? And of course, we have to be reminded, He is sovereign. He is still on the throne. He's not surprised by what's happening in Holland or Canada or Australia. But yeah, we have got basic biblical principles to turn to. I mean, at least two, right, of the 10 Commandments have to do with private property, right? Do not steal, do not covet. Both presuppose you've got something that you own and not the state. So yeah, if you're looking at bringing in Marxism with its attempt to abolish all private property, well, you're already messing with God and His 10 Commandments. So the Christian has to think about these things. Sure, we care about the environment, but not at the risk of, potentially killing or deliberately murdering millions of people. Hate to say it, a lot of the people who talk the most about humanity and trying to save humanity are often the ones who care the least about human beings, right? A lot of these guys are quite open when they say we have to heavily get rid of so much of human population, or we have to crack down on human freedoms in order to save the planet. They're pretty open about what they want, and that is not what's in God's point of view. He says we put people first, obviously, take care of the planet, but anything that treats people as mere products to be disposed of as at will by governments, that's not a good place to be in, and God tends to step in when that kind of stuff happens.
Well, Bill, we have to draw our conversation to a close, but it's been a significant year. There's been lots of controversies we've been able to talk through each Friday, and no doubt 2023, the year ahead, will have an equal number of controversies. And as you're highlighting even now, almost to a preview, that farming may well be in the scopes of those who want to take control. Let me point listeners to the article we're talking about today called Dare to Resist the Great Reset and the Dutch Disease, and you'll be able to find that at billmuehlenberg.com or simply Google Culture Watch one word. Bill, the happiest and holiest of Christmases to you and yours. Thank you so much for a great year on 2020.
And the same to you and the listeners, Neil. Thanks again.